It's equivalent to, bringing someone into the emergency room and the doctor wantonly, willingly, intentionally, and knowingly deciding to let the patient die, but worse, and pushing a product on the patient that perhaps, the doctor has an investment in that ends up killing the patient. The doctor would be disbarred, prosecuted, and go to prison. There's no doubt about it. And yet this is exactly what's been done. And it's been done for profit, and it's been done for greed, and it's been done for control and power and money. And we have to hold these people accountable.
Welcome to Facing Future. Today's guests are John Hagar, a retired civil rights litigator and an active member of Extinction Rebellion, Dr. Peter Carter, founder of the Climate Emergency Institute, an IPCC reviewer and co-author of Unprecedented Crime, Climate Science Denial, Game Changers for Survival, and Jonathan Logan, who is a co-founder of Extinction Rebellion America. The IPCC reports all show conclusively that unless we change business as usual, we are headed for extinction. The Global Climate Crimes Project, which we're here today to discuss, seeks to hold specific individuals, those who subsidize, finance, or profit from destroying the planet, and including those who create and distribute fake news to deny the science of climate change, culpable in an international court of law because they have committed crimes against humanity. John, would you like to explain how the process will work?
Yes. The Global Climate Crimes Project's primary purpose is to bring people who are engaging in crimes against humanity to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court in The Hague. The ICC has jurisdiction over these people based on the Treaty of Rome. And what we're hoping to do is to gather scientific evidence, of which we have a considerable amount, find some, we would call in the United States, plaintiffs, and then file a communication with the ICC. A communication with the ICC is similar to what we would call a complaint in the courts in the United States. And the primary purpose of the project is to move the window of discourse so that people understand, and by people I mean the common citizens in the United States, understand that individuals who now sort of appear in public as a CEO of a corporation or as a media star or a news person, that they are in fact guilty of crimes because they've knowingly engaged in conduct that is leading to the death of hundreds, thousands, and eventually millions of people. So what we're hoping to do is to get jurisdiction from the court and pursue action against a select number of climate criminals. There's a lot of them out there. In our initial analysis, we've broken them down to extractors, people who go in and pull things out of the earth or, say, finance the destruction of the Amazon so they can grow crops to feed beef in the United States. Then there's people who subsidize it, people in politics especially, who have made a long career of subsidizing climate collapse, subsidizing oil extraction or other industries, giving money out of taxpayer money, giving money to people who are endangering the environment. The third group is people who finance these organizations. And there's large banks. Chase Bank is a classic example, BlackRock Investments, where they go and invest in climate projects, climate destruction projects, power plants, coal plants, et cetera, knowing full well the destruction they're causing. And the last group is what we're calling deniers. These are individuals who engage in deceptive information, misinformation, deliberate lies, or they allow the communication of lies, usually for their financial benefit. We're seeking to hold these groups of people, and again, we're not certain which ones exactly, but we're gonna find those where the evidence is the clearest and take the case to the International Criminal Court. And hopefully in the process of doing this, help people understand that business as usual cannot continue. We need to do things differently and change the system that is threatening us all.
The International Criminal Court has not, the treaty that set it up has not been ratified by the United States. And even recently, Blinken has said, reinforced that we're not going to be held by these, by any judgment. How are you going to get around that or work with that? How are you going to show that the United States is protecting polluters?
Well, there's a variety of different strategies we can use. And to begin, we need to understand how a case can go to the International Criminal Court. The International Criminal Court can take cases recommended by certain United Nations bodies or by member organizations, member states. The United States, you're absolutely right, has never signed the agreement, even though the agreement is originally designed and applies primarily to war crimes. We're not part of it, which is unfortunate. However, any group of citizens can take a case to the ICC and present it to the ICC's prosecution office. And that's the approach we're most likely to take. There's some other options, but primarily that's the way that we think we should proceed. And ask the prosecutor's office, provide them with the facts, and ask them to take the case. Now, many of the people that we're concerned about travel in many countries, and they engage in their destruction in many countries. So, for example, you can have someone that runs Cargill Corporation that primarily is doing their destruction in Brazil and in other countries. So in many cases, the people that we're recognizing are international in scope, and they are involved in illegal activities in countries that are member states of the ICC. Another challenging issue we face is, how do we get the rights of indigenous people before the court? Because essentially under the present system, they're precluded. And we intend to raise that issue. We may seek and gather with indigenous people because they're suffering the first and the most, and take them to the court as plaintiffs and just sort of challenge the system. Will you recognize these people or not? And see what happens. But we think there's a way to get the matter before the court in an appropriate legal fashion.
Well, certainly it is an international problem, the extraction occurring across borders.
Right.
It's not just what you do in your own country. You know, Norway can look lily white and then, transport coal to other places, or, all kinds of cases of this. We're mining other countries to death. Jonathan, you wanted to speak something about the environmental impacts of these polluters.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear specifically from Peter on that, since he's an expert. But, the way I look at it is this: that we've known, when I say we, I mean, even the President of the United States, Johnson, was informed in the 60s that carbon economy and the effects of CO2 in the atmosphere and the other greenhouse gases would not just be bad, but possibly catastrophic, and likely to be really dangerous if we continued along the path we were going, which was increasing every year on year. And what sprung up around the oil, gas, petroleum, coal industries was an entire cadre of marketers, of sort of deniers, and of people trying to take advantage of the public to keep the game going, the huge financialized game going. And I think, the tobacco industry is instructed. In fact, the same people that help the tobacco industry keep the secret of tobacco and the dangers of tobacco and cancer relationships secret are the same ones that have helped the oil and fossil fuel industries do the same, right? And the opioid industry is instructive. I mean, it's really hard to imagine the scale of the pain, the suffering, the destruction, and the collapse of our economies and the environment and all the migration, everything that's going to happen because these people knew and lied and misinformed and diverted information. So I think that we're looking at the largest crime in human history. Now, is it defined squarely in the box of some of the things the ICC has written? Not yet. But as you know, all of these things evolve over time. And just like the way that tobacco was held responsible and the opioids have been held responsible, it's time to hold the climate criminals responsible as well.
Yes, indeed. I think this project is fantastic. Peter, you're one of the IPCC reviewers. What would you like to say about it?
Well, first of all, actually, it's very good to hear John and Jonathan describe this project. It is a really good project. I feel very lucky to be a sort of a small part of it by, advising on some science. Now, you said already that this is a crime of all time. Our sort of standard of crime, our standard of genocide, our standard of evil in our civilization is determined, of course, with a terrible event that happened in my lifetime, which murdered up to 10 million people, completely innocent people, for no reason at all, apart from actually that it was in the economic interests. That's how this horrible Holocaust started of certain people in Europe. So we're looking at something which is certainly as bad as that. There is no question of that. But in this case, we're looking now at billions of people. And this was finally confirmed by the recently released IPCC, their 6th Assessment Working Group 2 report on the impacts of climate change. Both this Working Group 2 and Working Group 1 are very different reports for the IPCC, and the reason is very simple. The scientists now have so much evidence on the impacts that are happening and the fact that they're inevitably going to get a lot worse, that now the scientists are talking in terms of this is definite, this is certain, and they've actually put numbers on matters. So this is now documented by the world's scientists, and that is actually confirmed by the world's governments. There's two great sources for people that might want to delve further, and one is a pretty famous book called Merchants of Doubt by Professor Oreskes, and this documents in detail how the corporations, the CEOs, are acting in just the same manner as they did for the tobacco industry, and costing the lives of millions of people in that case. We're primarily, of course, looking at fossil fuel corporations, but as John said, it's not limited to fossil fuel corporations. People may be surprised to know actually how the corporations work. They make themselves accountable to no one. They are operated on a military manner. And there's good reason in our civilization why the CEOs are paid tens of millions of dollars a year. It's not just because they're selling their souls for the evil results of climate change, global heating. They're very, very powerful people. And for example, Exxon has had at least 3 that I can remember shareholder motions in their annual meetings, simply to introduce a measure within Exxon that Exxon takes into consideration climate change in its plans. Very simple. All 3 cases were fought tooth and nail by the Exxon CEOs at the time. It was an incredible matter to follow on the news. These people are totally and absolutely responsible. It's important to point that out because the project, quite properly, of course, is accusing the CEOs of crimes against humanity. Now, crimes against humanity is sort of hardly enough even. I mean, this is crimes against all humanity. This is a crime on all today's children everywhere in the world. It's a horrendous crime on all future generations. There are 2 particularly, there are 4 particularly vulnerable groups, which are now definitely documented by science. The indigenous groups that have already been mentioned, in particular, the indigenous groups in the north of Canada, subarctic, they are, of course, suffering severely already, and Africa. Now, I think we've pretty well always known that always feels to me that we've always known that Africa was very, very vulnerable. So I just want to mention that Africa, according to the Working Group 2 report, is definitely going to be absolutely devastated. They've got that in detail. They've got the various impacts on Africa, the temperatures at which those impacts occur, and there's no way around it. Our civilization, our economy, our corporations and our governments have now committed the entire continent of Africa to the most devastating impacts and loss of life. This is loss of life and suffering on a scale that we've never even imagined. And now we know, because it's completely unavoidable to avoid 1.5 degrees C, which is completely disastrous, and we'll be very lucky to avoid 2 degrees C. The Africa situation, by the way, was termed economic genocide some time ago. So the idea that this is a crime against humanity is not new. I could go back to the fourth assessment of the IPCC in 2007. These criminals are still making sure that their corporations continue to do business, which is business of polluting the climate and killing people and destroying the future. I don't know whether we have the legal sort of capabilities, but this is a most important project, because even if the International Criminal Court decides that it doesn't exactly fit their, the texts and everything, from the point of view of the people who are suffering already, and by the way, the latest research on the number of people killed every year by fossil fuel air pollution, toxic air pollution, is 10.2 million people a year. So for years and years and years and years, the fossil fuel corporations specifically have been killing over 10 million people a year. And as I say, 10 million people is our sort of sense. What we know is to be a crime against humanity. So the science is behind it. And our challenge is a challenge to first of all, to the International Criminal Court. They will definitely be having a very, very, very serious look at this.
It's not only a crime against humanity, it's really a crime against all life. We have managed to wipe out 60 or 70% of the wildlife in the service of animal agriculture to produce meat. And it's going to result in food shortages around the world because we're misusing the land to grow soy and corn and to graze cattle. This is an enormous part of the problem, and probably one that could be addressed. And they know that, they know that animal agriculture, and they're using this seaweed idea. Oh, we'll get rid of some of the methane problem. It's not the problem of methane, it's the problem of land use. And, those kind of subterfuges to shift the issue like a shell game, this is really the problem, when it's not really like Exxon, BP created the carbon footprint. It's your fault. You have a carbon footprint. It's not our fault. We make the product. So all these kind of games that advertising has been playing are devastating impacts over time because people believe them, the fake news.
And I think that's one of the things we'll try to be approaching. The International Criminal Court has clearly said you cannot bring the crime of ecocide before us. We don't believe we have jurisdiction over that. So we have to focus our case on the destruction of human life. And that's why we're going to narrowly, tailor the case for that. But there are among practitioners before the court and in the United Nations, people that believe that the jurisdiction should expand to ecocide. And hopefully this type of litigation will open the eyes of the people that make those decisions and help move the court in that direction. And there's one other point I want to touch on that Peter mentioned, in that there is significant evidence in Africa of the very close connection between climate destruction and wars, whether they're civil disturbances or one nation pushing against another, or deliberately induced tribal attacks. There's a very clear connection between wars, climate collapse, and then the type of torture, murder, sexual assaults that is the classic definition of crimes against humanity. So another thing we're going to be trying to do is to bring that type of evidence to the International Criminal Court, showing that nexus between one type of problem and another, and how, in fact, they're all interrelated.
Well, we tend to think in little compartments, which is why we're in this terrible problem. We don't recognize biodiversity. We don't recognize the interacting features of the climate. We don't even recognize the Earth system is an interactive process. We have this idea we can separate out things and take things, extracting I don't know how many billions of tons of resources every year from the Earth with impunity, as if it's an infinite supply, which of course it isn't.
What I know is that the International Criminal Court involves crimes during a war. That's what it was set up to do, and it tends to restrict itself to situations in a war. I was involved decades ago in the nuclear disarmament and peace movement. It's all back again in front of our faces today, I'm afraid. Our economy is very much a war economy. And the result of that economy is that we think that we need to have fossil fuels, because fossil fuels can produce these massive killing machines that we are again seeing in operation in Europe, of all places. So we need to decarbonize. That's a scientific fact. To decarbonize, we need to demilitarize. I'm trying to make 2 points, I think. One is that for us to want to see some kind of a justice to the African people and the people in South Asia and children of future generations, this must be brought to the public and to be brought to the world. That has to happen. But that means that the destruction, the 10.2 million deaths every year, and the billions of deaths that are going to occur is very much to do with what we could call the war machine, if you want. So this indeed is a wartime crime. The only difference is it's almost of unimaginable proportions.
Well, the economies of the world were pulled out of depressions by creating wars. This is well known, and based their economies on war. And when war was over, what were they going to do? Well, they decided they would do consumerism and get people to, buy a whole lot of things they didn't need and produce a lot of products. So we went from, war to the new war, which is the war against the planet by consuming its resources at a furious pace, especially in the first world, as it's called. The worst world, one might say. Okay, so you are talking about targeting individuals because the court insists that they will prosecute not corporations, but individuals. So in your website, the Global Climate Crimes Project, you talk about specific individuals. And I wonder if you would like to talk about any of those people.
I think there's an important thing to mention, which is that the way that we've started to all, the four of us on this call and other people see these climate criminals is an evolving standard. 100 years ago, genocide was just part of what people did in war, right? And now we developed whole mechanisms and global agreements, even though the United States hasn't signed on. There's a recognition of the truth of the fact of these kinds of crimes as legally and morally reprehensible, and of course, punishment is adjudicated by the court. So the fact of the matter is that we're looking at an evolving standard. And so just like Polly Higgins, the famous Polly Higgins, was talking about ecocide and the shift in our perspective from one of consumers, if you will, of the whole entire planet with Western capitalism and the way that we live, to becoming citizens who are co-equally responsible for calling out the wrong things and then for pushing forward an agenda that creates the framework for which those people were held accountable, who were knowingly doing the bad things, right? And as John broke down for us, there is a list of those categories of types of people who are the climate criminals, 4 of them that we've identified so far. And I think we'll get to those. The most important thing, as far as I can see, is that we shift our experience and we shift our understanding of what is it that's been done, why has it been done, and who has been doing it in a way that they knew what they were doing and they intentionally disregarded it. It's equivalent to, bringing someone into the emergency room and the doctor wantonly, willingly, intentionally, and knowingly deciding to let the patient die, but worse, to do things that cause the patient to die, and pushing a product on the patient that perhaps, the doctor has an investment in that ends up killing the patient. We would all agree that that's just, the doctor would be disbarred and be, prosecuted and go to prison. There's no doubt about it. And yet this is exactly what's been done. And it's been done for profit, and it's been done for greed, and it's been done for control and power and money. And we have to hold these people accountable.
I think one of the issues we're raising through this project is to try to help people understand that they are different from these criminals. Mm-hmm. As you pointed out, that for years we've lived with the notion that it's our climate footprint that's the problem. And all of us, in a sense, we can't get through the day without doing something that destroys the environment. I mean, whether we try to eat something, you try to go outside, you get in your car, everything that we do, we are so locked in the system that after a while, people begin to feel guilty. And they also begin to feel disempowered. And part of the purpose of this project is to make folks understand that the citizens are not the same as the climate criminals. So it isn't so much picking, say, like an executive from Procter and Gamble. There may be people that work for Procter and Gamble that engage in entirely beneficial things. But to the degree that Procter and Gamble and its executives engage in a palm oil type products, knowing the consequences of what they do, and they do know, mm-hmm. that sort of changes them from one category to another. Or someone, say Rupert Murdoch, who makes billions of dollars by facilitating false news and deliberate lies about the climate in a variety of different continents. That makes him different than someone who has to watch television or tries their best to read a book or participates in other ways in our existing economic system. So we're trying to select people, and we haven't made the final choices, but we're beginning to identify people that are involved in the whole stage of this process, so that the viewers of our website understand that it's not just people that pump oil, because someone has to subsidize that, and someone has to finance it, and someone has to take the oil. And all of these people are involved in the process that makes them different from the rest of us. And that's sort of the way we're trying to focus how we go forward. And I'm not sure that the people who you're seeing with you today, all of us white, all of us from a developed country, should be making the decision as to who are the worst mm-hmm. climate criminals. And we're seeking out, asking other people, and we're thinking about forming a committee where people of different generations, countries, races, creeds make the final decisions, because the major climate criminal in India, for example, may be different than in the United States. And what we've done on the website so far is to select people who are destroying South America and parts of the Far East, especially Indonesia and those countries. We don't have everyone in the world yet, and theoretically the list could be pretty big. Pushing our resources just to list everyone and have their picture, but we're struggling with the right way to go forward.
I think the shock of finding yourself on a list as a climate criminal would be something to think about in terms of people's minds. People have a humanity somewhere in there, and yes. We hope that this project can help people touch on that humanity and recover it, possibly, to understand if there's no planet, there's no profit. It's insane what they're doing. That's the other part of it. It's not just criminal, it's an insanity. And I really am grateful to you all for creating this project, and I hope that it goes very, very well. And thank you very much for participating today in our program.